EvidenceCentral.org is a collection of evidences that the Book of Mormon is true. Of all of the evidences mentioned in September 2022, the article about Uto-Aztecan was the most popular. This presentation will talk about Hebrew in Native American languages, most specifically in the Uto-Aztecan language family. When languages originated from the same original language, they are said to belong to the same language tree or the same language family. Words in different languages that originated in the same word in the ancestor language are called cognates. Languages have been shown to belong to the same language family when as few as 50 to 200 words in each language have been shown to originate from the same word in the original language. Aramaic was the language spoken in Israel at the time of Jesus. Some believe that Aramaic was the language of Isaac's wife Rebekah and Jacob's wives Leah and Rachel, and that both Hebrew and Aramaic were spoken in their homes. The original language of a language family is called a proto-language. English is part of the Indo-European family of languages. This tree was discovered by comparing cognates in the languages shown. Over time, sounds in languages change in regular ways. For example, Latin and English both descended from Proto-Indo-European. In Latin, the word for father was pater. Over time, in the branch of the language tree of English, the initial P changed to F, and the T changed to TH. These kinds of changes are very common when languages separate from each other. There are many language families of Native Americans. One of them is the Uto-Aztecan language family that includes the languages of the Utes, the Hopis, and the languages that descended from Nahuatl, the language of the Toltecs and Aztecs. This is Brian Stubbs. He is an expert in Uto-Aztecan, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Ancient Egyptian. The authoritative book about Uto-Aztecan, the language family, was written by Brian. Before this book, the most authoritative book on the Uto-Aztecan language family had been written 50 years earlier by Brian's own professor. Brian has found that over 30% of the words of Proto-Uto-Aztecan originated in words from Hebrew, Aramaic, or Egyptian. Sometimes words that at first look like they could be cognates are actually words just borrowed from other languages. These are called loanwords. According to Lyle Campbell's book, Historical Linguistics, 5 to 6% of the vocabulary of any two languages may be accidentally similar. 30% is way too much to just ignore. It would not be surprising if languages spoken by descendants of the Book of Mormon peoples included words that descended from Hebrew and Aramaic. And since the prophets wrote in Reformed Egyptian, it would not be surprising to find Egyptian words. Brian discovered two sets of sound changes from the ancient languages into Uto-Aztecan. He believes one set of sound changes happened to the language spoken by Lehi's family, and the other to the language spoken by the Mulekites, the ancestors of the people of Zarahemla, since those two languages did not merge back together again for over 400 years. Here are some examples of Hebrew or Aramaic words on the left and corresponding Uto-Aztecan words on the right. The differences are because of regular sound changes that happened over time. Crocodiles in the Nile were obviously well known to the Egyptians. This may be evidence that they were well known by the Nephites as well. The former book I showed was written for linguists. This one shows evidence that Uto-Aztecan languages descended from the languages of the people of the Book of Mormon. It has been written for members of the church who are not linguists. This is a map of where Uto-Aztecan languages are now. It is interesting that Nahuatl, the language spoken by the Toltecs and Aztecs, is a Uto-Aztecan language, and that Quetzalcoatl is one of the strongest traditions of the white bearded god. In some places in the Book of Mormon, the people shot arrows, but in this reference, in Alma, the Lamanites were casting arrows, that is, they were throwing them. The atl is a tool that allows one to cast or throw an arrow. It is clear, since atl is a word from the Nahuatl language, that Nahuatl-speaking people are some of the people who use this tool. Nahuatl descended from Proto-Uto-Aztecan, so Nahuatl-speaking people were people whose language contained many words that came from Hebrew, Aramaic, and Egyptian, which is what we would expect. Another Uto-Aztecan language is Hopi. Hopi in the Hopi language means peace. The Hopi Indians have a tradition that they buried their weapons of war in the earth and promised not to take them up again. This is reminiscent of the anti-Nephi Lehi's in the Book of Mormon. The Hopis have a tradition of a white man who taught them of peace and what they called the true life plan, and who promised to return one day. They call him Pahana, the lost white brother. The ancestors of the Hopis, according to the Hopis, came in boats across the ocean from the west. They too wondered at first if one of the first white men who arrived in their lands in recent times could have been Pahana, the lost white brother, but they were disappointed. Hugh Nibley spoke many languages. He visited the Hopis and was one of very few white men that have ever seen one of their most sacred artifacts. Nibley was impressed by some of their sacred rituals. Nibley said, "They were similar in some ways to our temple endowment. Isn't it interesting that a people would have such a ritual that speak a language that descended from Proto-Uto-Aztecan, which had over 30% Hebrew, Aramaic, and Egyptian words?" It is clear that the Uto-Aztecan people do have strong historic ties to the Middle East. The traditions of the Hopis show that not all Native Americans came by way of the Bering Strait. It is striking that the Aztecs, whose language was at least 30% Hebrew, Aramaic, and Egyptian, had the strongest belief in Quetzalcoatl, the great white god. We can see in the traditions of the Hopis things that are near and dear to us. Joseph Smith could not have known all of these things except by revelation. In spite of all of the odds against him, he got things right when so many others have been wrong.